Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar on Future of Skincare Insights from Beauty and Care Industry. My name is Isha Sharma. I'm a sustainability consultant in Utopic, and this is Ishu Trivedi, a sustainability consultant and a co-host for our webinar. I'm excited to welcome you all in our webinar today, and we would be talking about sustainability in the beauty industry by touching the issues of environment, social, and governance aspects. Some of the house rules for today are, if you have any questions, you can add the questions in the chat box. You can also ask the questions at the end of the discussion. You can ask questions, relate concisely to the related topic. This will be the recorded session and it will be on our portal and you can have access to that. If you have any additional questions, you can email us at info@utopic.com. We are a technology company focused on sustainability and climate change, creating our digital solutions for the companies and individuals. Our mission is to enable social enterprises and individuals by using global frameworks and principles. Our framework is based on 24 sustainability and management criteria across 3 themes: environment, social, and governance. And our whole methodology is based on United Sustainable Development Goals, UN Global Compact, GRI, ISO 26000, and ILO, International Labour Organization. For today's agenda, we would be talking about beauty industry and the global trends, key 360 indicators for the beauty industry, connecting beauty industry with SDGs, panel discussion with the speakers, and conclusion of the webinar. Here is our panel for today, and further, it would be great if they all can start introducing themselves and about their work. So let's start with Jo.
Hi everyone, my name's Jo Chidley, and you can probably tell from my accent that I'm from Scotland. I'm the co-founder of Beauty Kitchen and Return, Refill, Repeat. We are a B Corp certified business, and also our products are cradle to cradle certified. So we have a reusable packaging system as well that we use at Beauty Kitchen, but we also offer that out to the personal care industry. My technical background is I'm an analytical chemist, a herbal botanist, and my passion really has always been sustainability. So I'm really looking forward to today.
Shabia.
Hi, this is Shabia Walia. I'm the founder of Wild Earth, and the basic philosophy why I started Wild Earth was when I was searching for clean, honest skincare for my daughter, who was very little at that time. And I ended up making products in my kitchen, and that's how the brand was born. It's a brand which grew essentially by word of mouth, and because mothers started recommending that why don't you make a shampoo and why don't you make a body butter, and from my humble kitchen this brand evolved. And my basic something which I believe in, my principle is that you don't need to harm the environment to look beautiful yourself. Both can coexist, and there can be very amicable synergy between both. So yes, clean, honest, transparent skincare is what Wild Earth is all about.
Thank you, Shabia. Mr. Rajan.
Yeah, my name is I'm Rajan, and I'm the founder of the men's grooming brand Manav. My background is more of the spa and the hospitality industry. I've been in the spa industry for past around 17 years. And this is this brand is specifically catering to eco-friendly space for men's, and I guess we have a very exclusive section, because you usually don't see men's product being which are completely on an eco-friendly line of products. So that's what a brief about Manav.
Thank you. Nikita.
Yes. Hi. First of all, very sorry to be late. I was actually I was running with a family emergency and very sorry to be late. Yes, so Ilana was essentially started, and what Shabia rightly mentioned was, the need for an honest, sustainable brand that can coexist without harming the environment, that can coexist with the environment. So Ilana was essentially started to bring in that shift in the lifestyle, like start that conversation with people where it's the need of the hour, that people understand that being sustainable isn't just a trend or just something that we can sort of just tell each other that, oh, this is what I did. It's about something more than that. It's about preserving our habitat and our planet. So I think Ilana was started out of this very, very innate and very dire need of just being honest and being a low waste brand, closing the loop of what we put out on the earth, and thus recycling it and obviously closing the loop. So I think that is what sustainability was to us when we started. It was about that conversation starter. Yeah.
Thank you, speakers, for your introduction. Moving on to the beauty industry. The beauty industry is being remodeled by many exciting changes that will continue to affect the grooming habits and shape the cultural perceptions of the beauty for years to come. The beauty and the personal care is a $465 billion industry globally, and global skincare alone is $111 billion market for BPC sales. The global organic personal care market is growing at an annual rate of almost 10%. The skincare as a market segment is growing faster than any other part of the beauty industry. Skincare growth is attributable to the unique position that it occupies amongst a variety of trends, like their growing desire for health and promoting, and the self-care products, increasing interest in the power of regimens and the routines, the ability of the social media to more rapidly empower and inform the consumers. Perfumes, hairsprays, and deodorants pollute the environment as much as the car emissions. High adoption of the herbal products has led to the growth of the segment at 15% annually. And on the back of the fact that people are becoming more aware of possible side effects on skin by constantly use of chemical formulations-based cosmetics. Brands making the most headway are those actively listening and responding to the changing needs and demands of their customers. At the root of their success is an understanding of what today's beauty buyer expects from the brands and the changes they want to see across the beauty industry more generally. Global trends in the beauty industry, when we talk about the consumers, they are demanding full transparency from the manufacturers about their sourcing methods, products, ingredients, and sustainability practices. 86% of the people are environmentally aware consumers, and they do not buy the products that cause damage to the environment. For the animal testing, 80% of the world allows cosmetics to be tested on animals. These tests oftentimes result in harmful allergic reactions that cause considerable pain and suffering for the animals. According to the American survey, 75% of the women prefer to purchase products that came with a cruelty-free bunny. For the nature-based solutions, 68 to 70% consumers are willing to buy the cosmetics with a transparent ingredient list, and they pay extra for the products which are made of natural ingredients and in the sustainable packaging. 57% of the consumers prefer natural products, which are less effective over chemical products that are more effective. Moving on to the utopic indicators for the beauty industry, Ishu will take over.
I'm sorry, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you, Isha, and welcome to all the panelists, Joe, Rajan, Shabia, and Nikita, and all the listeners who made time to join us today. My name is Ishu Trivedi. I work as a sustainability consultant at Utopic, and I'm going to be taking you further into this webinar. Starting with the Utopic indicators for beauty industry, our sustainability framework covers 24 indicators structured along 3 themes, which are environment, social, and governance, dividing 8 indicators in each theme and covering all aspects of sustainability in the beauty industry. Further, we have also identified one spotlight indicator along each theme. In the environment pillar, we have identified energy consumption, emission reduction, waste management, recycling, water management, packaging, biodiversity, building as the most relevant to the beauty industry. In the social theme, we have identified human rights, labor laws, diversity, customers, policies, employees, communities, heritage, and wildlife. And in the governance pillar, the most relevant indicator for the beauty industry are management, policies, certification, technology, transparency, innovation, supply chain, and compliances. Now, for environment, we have identified packaging as the spotlight issue, since one of the biggest ways that beauty industry harms the environment is through single-use plastic packaging. These containers are often not recycled and end up in landfills and waterways, leading to a buildup of harmful waste products. One of the most startling examples of this buildup is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, measuring 1.6 million kilometers square and containing 1.8 trillion pieces of plastics. However, many beauty companies such as Lush Cosmetics and Kevin Murphy are taking steps to reduce the impact of their packaging. For example, Lush formulates shampoos and other bath products in a solid form, so no plastic packaging is required. On the other hand, Kevin Murphy, a hair care company, has decided to make their packaging out of plastic waste found in the ocean. So, as companies collectively begin to cut down on their use of plastics, beauty industry will slowly and steadily become more sustainable. Now, in the social theme, the spotlight has been given to animal welfare, since animals have been used in painful tests to demonstrate the effectiveness of safety of cosmetics. Despite the availability of alternatives like in vitro test methods using human cells and tissues, or using advanced computer modeling techniques, also referred to as silico models, and studies done on human volunteers, countless animals are still subjected to cruel tests around the world to bring a new eyeshadow palette or a cologne to the market. These modern methods are way more relevant to humans and have been found to predict human reactions better than the traditional outdated animal tests. Yet it is sad to know that the only way some companies will embrace non-animal tests is if they are legally required to do so. Even consumers and cosmetic manufacturers believe that the tests done on animals are unethical and unnecessary, and the brands that continue to do so are damaging the reputation of the industry. Now, moving on to the third pillar of sustainability, which is governance. Certifications and policies have been put in the spotlight, since certifications is the most reliable means to estimate the credibility of natural, organic, and cruelty-free claims made by cosmetic brands. According to a research, many natural and organic cosmetic brands with their chemically clean claims appear less reliable when compared to the certified brands that appear more reliable to the consumer, as these standards such as EcoCert, COSPE-Bio, Soil Association, NPA, NACHU, etc. provide clear definitions of what they consider as natural or organic cosmetics, while also giving the list of ingredients and processes they approve. Now, moving on, let's have a look at these global goals and see how each of them fits relevant to the beauty industry. So let's start with what are Sustainable Development Goals. SDGs, also known as the Global Goals, were adopted by United Nations in 2015 as a universal call to action to end the most pressing issues of humanity by 2030. Since the 17 goals are self-integrated, they recognize that action in one area will also affect the outcome in the others. So we have identified these 9 goals which are most relevant to the beauty industry. Let's start discussing with goal 4, which is quality education. For this industry, it is important to educate their customers and local communities about the products, its processes, and its impact on the environment and society. Also, educating the communities on the importance of recycling and reusing would spread awareness among people for a sustainable living. Coming to goal 5, which is gender equality. So why is this important? Because ending all forms of discrimination against women and girls is a basic human right, and it is also crucial to accelerating sustainable development in the beauty industry. It has been proven time and again that empowering women and girls has a multiplier effect, and it helps drive up economic growth and development across company and board. Let's move on to goal 7, affordable and clean energy. This goal emphasizes that brands could turn to renewable energy sources for their energy consumption in the production and manufacturing processes of the product, ultimately reducing their direct and indirect emissions. And this goal becomes a whole lot important for the beauty industry since transport emissions are a major concern among beauty brands. For example, meeting energy requirements from renewable sources by installing biomass, biomethanization, solar panels, or cogeneration or combined heat and power plants, etc. on sites. Now let's see goal 8, decent work and economic growth. This goal deals with the issues like increasing labor productivity, reducing the unemployment rate, especially for young people, and improving access to financial services and benefits that are essential components of sustained and inclusive economic growth. Moving on to goal 12, which is responsible consumption and production. It ensures sustainable consumption and production patterns and also addresses the use of natural resources, chemical waste, and fossil fuels. This goal encourages investing in renewable energies to lower costs, improving profitability, reducing pollution, and also enhancing the company reputation. Goal 13, which is climate change, it urges to take urgent actions to combat climate change and its impact by reducing the global greenhouse gas emissions. Goal 14, which is life below water, and it's very important since it deals with the marine life that suffers due to the ingredients of beauty products that find their way into our seas and oceans. Products from our shampoos to our mascaras leave lasting impacts on the earth, from destruction of coral reefs to the buildup of microplastics and ingredients that often find their way into our delicate environments such as seas and oceans. Like the case of microplastics, a water insoluble plastic particle which is smaller than 5 millimeter, and it performs several functions in the cosmetics from exfoliation to tooth polishing. It passes easily through the filters of water treatment plants due to their small size and ends up in the sea, causing potential threat to the marine ecosystem. To avoid this, it is wise to turn towards natural alternatives such as inorganic minerals like quartz sand or products from plants like cellulose beads, fruit seeds, and shells, etc., to replace microplastics in cosmetics and save marine life. So after discussing life below water, we shall also discuss life on land, which is goal 15. And it is equal, and this goal is equally, if not more important, since life on land urges for no net loss of biodiversity due to the negative waste footprint of the beauty industry. In just 1 year, beauty industry produces more than 120 billion units of packaging globally, contributing to loss of 18 million acres of forest land every year. This packaging footprint can be reduced by prohibiting the use of halogenated plastics and promoting recyclable and renewable materials for primary and secondary packaging, as well as redesigning traditional cosmetic products to drastically reduce or completely avoid plastic packaging wherever possible. And lastly, there is goal 17, which is partnership for goals, and it deals with partnering with organizations to maximize our positive impact and minimize any negative footprint on the environment, economy, and society. Now, moving on to the next slide, why natural and sustainable beauty products? Sustainability in the beauty industry is becoming a consumer priority across the globe, with many consumers choosing to buy fewer plastic products and also expecting brands to make their products more sustainable. Also, natural and sustainable products gives us a sense of environmental responsibility, increased effectiveness, environmental friendly approach, and of course, they are more than cosmetics, touching the ethical and social dimensions. This expectation is pushing beauty brands towards a sustainable innovations, making products safer for people and the planet, using only non-toxic ingredients, manufacturing waterless products, a focus on upcycling and carbon neutrality, reusable or refillable packaging solutions, and many more. Now, moving on with our today's panel discussion. So there are 4 topics of the panel discussion today. 2 of them will be taken up by me and the other 2 by Isha. First topic of our panel discussion is the demand of natural and organic products. Natural and organic products are the products made with natural ingredients that are grown without harmful pesticides or fertilizers. These products are not tested on animals and they do not release harmful chemicals in the environment. Also, the packaging of these products is plastic free and it does not harm us in any way. So on this, I would like to discuss with our panelists few questions and we can learn from their opinions and life experiences. I would like to ask that since the demand of natural products and ingredients is increasing among customers, do you think that in coming years, natural cosmetics can take on mainstream cosmetics as a viable alternative? So, Joe, would you
Okay,
like to?
I'll go. So if we think back to a couple of slides where you gave the overview of the overall global beauty industry and the size of the market, if you then go and delve deeper into the different categories, we know that natural, organic, vegan and cruelty-free, that category is growing at a much faster rate than all of the other categories within the beauty industry. And I think, will that then become mainstream? I think it has to become mainstream. I think the war on plastic, whether that's microplastics or macroplastics, everything that is synthetic has to be reviewed and looked at. But it has to be done in a considered way because we have an industry that's very exciting. But coming back to some of the SDG goals, it also gives freedom and gender equality to females because it's a very female orientated industry. So I think it's always about a balance. But definitely natural and organic ingredients, for me, should just become the norm. They should just become hygiene factors. Customers should just be picking up and not having to look for natural and organic because it just all products are. That is really the ultimate in my head.
Correct, Joe. I totally agree with you. And I love your point on gender equality. Also, I'd like to say that this even depends on the consumers because they are demanding greater transparency, not just in their skincare products, but also in the color cosmetics. They look for, products which are they look for full transparency of ingredients. And so the answer to these questions lie not just in how green makeup is formulated in the lab, but also in our perceptions and expectations as consumers. So yeah.
I think, as you rightly said, Ishu, is makeup is something that's always considered to be bad, while skincare is something that, okay, it's a good thing on your skin. But my argument is, why can't makeup be as good as your skincare? Why does makeup have to be all chemically ridden, and then why does skincare get to have all the benefits? So, in fact, even like you rightly said, the future of makeup also can be very well natural and organic because makeup can very well be just natural and organic. And of course, like going to that debate, I think ingredients should be looked at from a perspective where you look at the sustainability factor first and then look at whether it's naturally derived or it's from a natural source or whether it is synthetically modified. The only reason being that an ingredient that's, say, suppose traveling across the world just to be in your bottle, no matter how organic or natural it is, I don't think it cuts the list because that's not sustainable in all ways. So, I mean, of course, to each to its own, but I think when we at Ilana choose something, this is where we draw the line. Sustainability matters to us more than anything. But yeah, like to answer your question, I really think that makeup can be as good as skincare, and the future makeup has to be as safe and honest and transparent and natural as possible.
Thank you, Nikita. Thank you so much. Shabia, would you like to go ahead and share something?
Yeah, I think when your consumer gets educated, the impact is back on the manufacturers or whoever's creating that product, right? Because, I remember when I started Wild Earth a few years back, around 2016, and I had done this little survey where I asked people that instead of plastic, if I use glass bottles or glass jars, would they be happy? And there were a lot of customers who said that no, in the bathrooms, we wouldn't prefer glass because it can break, it may make the product expensive. versus today when your consumers are educated. It's also the post-COVID impact where people are placing more stress on health, good health, and natural and organic produce, where now they are asking for glass jars, or they are asking, do your soaps have palm oil, or they are asking, what do sulfates and parabens mean, or they are coming up and saying, does it have silicones, versus 2016 where I had to tell people what is parabens, what is silicones, what is phthalates, and educate them. So that's a very refreshing trend I'm seeing. And as Joe said, we don't have an option. I think this is the way it has to go. I mean, it's gone beyond that phase where can we have an option, can we do this or that. I think it's a compulsion now. It's necessary for our existence. So yes, natural and organic can go mainstream, and I think the way it's going right now, where consumers are demanding transparency, I think it's good news for us all the way.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Even consumer today is very smart.
Yes.
They read, they read all the fine prints, they ask questions, and they also express their views openly.
Yes.
Yes, I totally agree. Rajan, please go ahead and share your thoughts on this. So I think you're muted. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry. If I be very specific to India and in the men's space, so men's space has always been predominated in India with hair care and shaving. So actually, the entire segment of skincare was not existing, if you say in true sense. And the beard and the grooming thing is something which is fairly a concept which has started from just say around 4 to 5 years. So we do not have on true sense. In fact, if I try to search for data on men's grooming and eco-friendly products, so actually we do not have much studies on it. The preferences. So how we started is that we started with an eco-friendly brand, and we started with an education blog also. So the whole goal was that we also educate that how this product is going to make a difference to the environment, and how this product is actually creating a difference in a space which is fairly new. So that's how we have done it, and I am sure that in coming years, this is something which will equally, would be seen by to pick a product, to select a product, which is a product which is completely vegan and natural and eco-friendly product for men's.
Yeah, totally naturally vegan, eco-friendly. This is the trend now. So thank you, speakers, for sharing your wonderful insights on this subject. We'll move on to the next topic of our discussion, which is certification labels. Since certifications and labels hold huge value in the clean beauty industry, they come in the forms of claims, badges, and seals, and estimate the credibility of organic and natural claims made by the brands. On this subject, I would like to discuss that in beauty, there is a fine line between greenwashing and credible claims. Products with natural and sustainable claims are emerging. According to you, which certifications or seals of approval can help consumers make informed decisions? So again, Joe, would you like to go first?
Yeah. So the challenge, as you said, with certifications is that you can put a lot of work and effort as a brand into getting a certification, and then another brand just creates a little logo and doesn't do the work and does the greenwashing. But to be honest, I think that's always going to happen. You're always going to have clever marketeers that will want to ride on the back of your transparency as a brand within your supply chain. The way that we have approached it at Beauty Kitchen is we have looked at multi-attributes. And what I mean by that is that they don't just look through one lens. So if I take cradle to cradle certification, for example, you have to look through 5 different areas, which includes material health, water stewardship, social fairness, safe and circular in terms of the chemicals that are used within the formulation. And when I'm talking about chemicals, I'm talking about both natural and synthetic, because natural is still a chemical. It still has a chemical formula. And we have found when you have a multi-attribute approach to the certification, what it does as a business is it demonstrates to me the gaps that I have, because you don't score high on all of them. You know, nobody's perfect. But what I've then done is we've then used that to tell a story and bring our customers on a journey with us. Because let's face it, we're all on a sustainability journey, and some of us know more than others, but actually none of us are perfect in sustainability. It's almost probably not achievable to have perfection in sustainability. So the certifying bodies that you have here are all highly regarded, but some of them are for different markets, you know, and I think that plays a part as well. You know, if you've got a UK focus or an Indian focus or a US focus, then I would suggest as a brand to go with a certification that's within your country to start with, before you start thinking about ones that are further afield. Because you've only got, if you're growing a business, you've only got a certain amount of time in a day, and you have to prioritize. But I think certifications give an independent viewpoint, and they can then confirm as a business what you're good at and what you need to improve in. And you can then share that story with your consumers.
Yeah, correct. In fact, certifications, they let you know that a product is safe, how safe a product is, and how reliable it is. And it's basically a benchmark for product quality. It's a guidepost leading you to a, reliable manufacturers. So it's very important from consumer perspective. So yeah, Shabha,
I think, see, I don't think anybody goes out in the market with the intent that let's cheat customers, okay? Or let's make bad products, or let's give them something they don't deserve, right? We all have the correct intention. I think what plays a major part, and I think Joe touched upon it a little bit, is is the cost factor, right? For smaller brands like us, every certification per product is a huge cost factor. So while I may want all the certifications under the sun on my brand, and it may adhere to all the policies and the certifications too, but I may not have the capital as a small brand too. So most of the times, you get hindered on that part. Secondly, as rightly said by Joe, like for example, I started in India, but within a year we were exporting to Philippines, which requires its own set of guidelines. And then somebody approached me from Europe, and there was some, it required an amount of certifications. So though the products were under those guidelines, but the cost of getting those certifications was really huge. And so I had to let go of that export order. So that was one. But having said that, I think as a brand, what we look for are, 3-4 very critical characters and characteristics. And one is, the sourcing of the raw ingredients. I mean, for me, that's key, because that's where it all starts, right? So and in India, there are a lot of third-party manufacturers who manufacture for you. So the manufacturer may claim that he has the right sourcing, but if he doesn't have the right sourcing, and you are claiming that your products are natural and organic, then it may lead to a huge disaster. So for me, the sourcing is very important. EcoCert ingredients is what we really go with. Fair and ethical trade, for me, that counts the list, that if I'm making money out of my business, then people who cater to it, people who are making those soaps, people who are dependent on, their small scale industries also get paid well. I am a pet lover, I'm an animal lover. I have 2 cats in my house. So that's primary for me, no cruelty to animals on any stage. And fourth is giving back to society. So Wild Earth has a parallel community called the Bluebells community, and whatever we earn, we give a small portion back to society in supporting the underprivileged. I think as brands, we need to be very conscientious. We take so much from the environment, we take so much from our ecological systems. We have to give back, whatever cause you may choose. But I think consciously brands can really bring an entire impact. And when your consumers see that you're socially also driven, and it's not just a profit organization, then I think they get more, they stick with you. They want to be a part of your cause, even if it's indirectly. So I think these are key factors when I look at certifications for my brand.
Yes, of course. And also, I love the one point that you touched. It was about expenses, that the certifications, they are very expensive. And of course, it becomes hassle for startup brands or brands who are trying to, establish themselves at this point. They cannot afford to buy certifications worth $100,000 or, in lakhs. So yeah, it becomes a hassle for them. To fill this gap, Utopic has brought some subscription plans which are very affordable, especially for the startup brands. And these plans are mainly, they showcase your sustainable stories. So they are basically platforms so that brands can showcase their sustainable stories. We can discuss about them later.
Sure.
Rajan, would you like to go ahead?
Couple of things out here, when you speak about, what happens is for an eco-friendly. Now, the word eco-friendly as such or a sustainable thing is not very well defined in India, actually. A brand can just be cruelty-free and they say eco-friendly. They may have some organic ingredients and they say organic, eco-friendly. As Johnny rightly she said, that somewhere we will go up and somewhere we will go down, and that is something which is very true. I would say that when we are handling a niche brand like Manav, it's also to do with the ethics and how you would like to connect with your consumers. In our case, we were very clear we're touching the men's space, and I would like to touch my consumers with my USPs of an eco-friendly men's grooming brand. So, these certifications definitely are, are somewhere where you do get with it. But in the beginning, I would say that, it's more about the ethics of the brand and how the brand wants to connect with their end consumers. So we would like to be connected with a brand which is cruelty-free, a brand which is eco-friendly, a brand which is, no plastic packing. So those are our USPs. So we would like to be remembered that. So I guess that speaks itself. The connect itself is very. It's at a level. It's at a different level. But nevertheless, having said that, definitely when you are into certain specific markets, you would need certain certification at some stage, and those are things which have to be worked out at one time. I do agree with Shabia here. We had a similar issue when we had something to do with the Middle Eastern market, but then we have to probably somewhere you have to stretch and get those certifications done. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Rajan. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your opinions on the subject. Nikita, would you like to share something?
Yes. So, as Shabia also said correctly, the expenses for a startup brand are something that, aren't something that are very sustainable for a startup brand to do that initially, So, there are a lot of parameters that one has to take care of, starting from just being local. Now, if you're sourcing local, chances are like we had this incident in a company where there's a local farmer from Maharashtra where we are trying to source a particular ingredient from, and he didn't have an EcoCert certification, either did he have the bandwidth to get one. So definitely certifications do come in where I think the trust level of a consumer increases to a level where he can and would want to invest in your brand. However, it's about your vision and what you are trying to sell, and also I think it's about more than your vision. It's about just being an honest brand. So I think with increasing awareness, it's about not talking down to your consumers. It's about letting them know that it's okay to ask questions. We're here to answer them, and probably in some cases, all the three panels actually summed it all up. It's not possible for us to be at the top of sustainability or all of these certifications at one point. You can't have it all. But I think it's up to us to be genuine and sort of set that standard for us. Always remember the root cause why you started the brand, because as you get big it can so happen that you might like you can't be diluting your values, and you have to stay true to your root foundation. And I think it's about just being an honest and a transparent brand, and I think that will go a long way.
Yes, definitely. And we cannot have, all the certifications at one point, but yeah, we can go for all the relevant certifications.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
I
you.
think I would like to add to what Nikita just said. You know, the beauty of small brands and the beauty of social media today is people know who is the person making their products, you know,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and they have a face to it. Like, you know, versus a very big company, you buy a soap, something goes wrong, you cannot contact who's the person except for maybe the
Yeah.
call center or some person sitting in some remote city. But here, you
Yeah.
know, customers are talking directly to me and saying, Shabia, this happened with your cream, or you know, maybe you could change the pump, it's dripping, whatever. So I think that accessibility and this whole thing where there's no middle person and I can talk to my consumers directly on Instagram and say, hey, I made this and this is what I think. When people find the founder credible, then automatically that's the biggest certification your brand can have. So
Because then they're investing in you, and they're not, I mean, they can relate to the person that's behind the brand. They're not talking to a wall anymore.
absolutely. And your story matters. I think how you
Yeah.
started, why you started, and absolutely remembering how you got here is all what matters.
Yeah.
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 Thank you so much, speakers, for sharing your experiences and your opinions on this subject today. Our next topic of the discussion is manufacturing, focusing on water less beauty as the new trend and the use of renewable energy sources in the production process. Talking about water less products, this concept was originally about increasing the potency of skincare products to have greater efficacy on the skin. However, now it's also about becoming conscious of how precious water is as a resource and trying to save it in the production process. Apart from this, beauty brands are also incorporating renewable energy sources such as solar power, wind power, etc. in their manufacturing processes. For example, Oriflame's all offices, including sites and factories, are 100% powered by energy from renewable sources. So beauty companies are also investing in hydrogen fuel cells to store energy for later use. On this, I would like to know your opinions on waterless formulas. Are they actually making the beauty products more sustainable? If yes, how? Also, what types of renewable energies do you think can be deployed in the beauty industry to promote sustainable production? So, please go ahead and say something on this.
So I think with waterless beauty, they tend to be more sustainable because it's water stewardship. So you are using, either you're not using any water in the product, or you're not expecting the consumer to use any water when they're using the product. The other general thing with waterless beauty is if you think of your original slide talking about Lush and their shampoo bars as an example, there's no packaging required either. So there's no water used in creating the packaging. So for me, waterless beauty, it depends how you define it. And it depends what it means to you as a brand in terms of what can you develop as a product. So a facial oil that has obviously no water in it because it's only oil-based is a waterless product. So I think it is a huge driver for innovation across the globe. And I think it's great to give formulators something else to work on. When it comes to renewable energy, I mean, this is a no-brainer. So the sun, gives more energy in one day than we have used in all of human history. You know, job done. So I think we would be mad not to start looking at renewable energy. And I think if we want to be sustainable as an industry, we can't survive on fossil fuel powered manufacturing, yet if we're saying that we truly want to be more sustainable. However, these things take time, and renewable energy sources are not available to everyone across the globe.
Yes, exactly. They're not available for everyone. Shabia, would you like to say something? Your mic is...
Sorry. So I think I am particularly enamored by this whole thing called waterless cosmetics, and I've been thinking about it, and I'm intending to take my company in that direction, where you create a face wash which does not require water, or you go in for the, so as Joe rightly pointed out, it's different, it's at different levels, right? It could be at the manufacturing level, where you're not using the hot process method to make soaps, you're not using machines to dry the soaps, you're using the cold process method, they're handmade and you're drying it out in the sun, so there you have saved some resources. The other thing could be packaging, yeah, and I'm a huge fan of the Lush philosophy, where they don't have absolutely any packaging. And being a small brand, I reach out to my customers and I keep telling them that if you don't need packaging, we can deliver it in a cloth bag, so that's fine. And I find so many of them saying, there's no need to put labels on the jars, also just send it in the jar, so save on paper, or don't pack the soap in the, because I'm going to use it right away. And that's very empowering for someone like me and my small brand. But apart from that, what I consciously always feel is beauty and skincare should always also be somewhere about minimalism, because this is one industry where that hoarding just doesn't stop. You want that next shade of lipstick, you want 10,000 products on your dressing table. I mean, it's beautiful, right? The packaging is so beautiful. You keep buying. You want lip balms in every flavor, you want lipsticks of 10 shades, you want a outdoor look, an evening look, and morning look, all that. So when I design my products, I try to figure if one product can be used multiple ways. Like, for example, my body butter can be used as a hand cream and a foot butter. Or when I'm making a body scrub, then it can also be used as a foot soak, a bath salt, and a foot scrub. So I think I am trying to encourage my customers that you buy one, and Indians love this concept, right? One buy one, but do 3-4 things with it. We're always high on economical use of products. So I think this is my own contribution to reducing, though as a business, I don't know whether it makes business sense when you're selling lesser products, but I feel that if you can give more value to your customers via one product rather than selling them four, in a way, I think you're contributing to the environmental impact. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Thank you, Shabia, and definitely I agree with your point. Rajan, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah. So this is, the waterless beauty. I feel is, again, I would just put it as a very, very fairly a very new concept in the men's space. And most of the products which we are completely to do with into the beard grooming and products where you actually don't have your usage of water is any which ways at a minimum. And we are actually not into any product where you actually are using, other than the soaps. If you see, even the soaps, we do not have the liquid soaps. And we're coming with a new range of beard waxes and solid perfumes, where again we actually somewhere we get connector. We don't have that bit. So I feel that is something which is something something we already somewhere we are already there. As far as the renewable energy is there, our factory already has a solar powered water plant, so we already using it at one level, and that's probably that's something which is already existing with us.
Thank you, Rajan, and it's very good to know that already redesigned your products to become more sustainable. On waterless beauty, I'd like to say that in today's time, it's not so much about efficacy, but it also represents a desire for clean formulas. It's also travel friendly and non-toxic formulas, basically, because water is more prone to catch bacteria, and so most of the products use preservatives in order to increase the shelf life of the products. So yeah, this is one concept that goes around waterless products. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your opinions. Nikita, would you like to go next?
Yeah. So, in terms of waterless beauty, yes, of course, as a formulator, I mean, it's the easiest thing to do because you have to. There's no preservatives or emulsifiers. Emulsifiers maybe, but you can do away with preservatives, like you said. It doesn't catch bacteria. Maybe a little bit of like an antioxidant oil is something you can use. But in my experience, 3 years ago when we started with the brand, even I started the brand out of my own kitchen and with whatever little formulating experience I had at that time, I was very sort of skeptical of using any sort of preservatives or emulsifiers. So basically, I just started with some oil blends and some powder blends and some handmade cold processed soaps. But over the time, over the journey, I realized and I understood that the tropical climate in India doesn't really allow us to only use facial oils on our skin. Sometimes it's essential also to use like a lighter textured cream or like a emulsion of some sort on your skin, which you can't do without water. So I think, like Joe said, it's about your perception about and your way of executing what Waterless Beauty means to you as a brand. As a next big eco trend, I think it definitely has a lot of scope as long as you do it the right way and you execute it the right way. But I think less water beauty is something that makes more sense, so that you conserve as much as water instead of just saying that we don't use water at all. According to me, that is what probably would be something that's more feasible. And when it comes to renewable energy use, yes, of course, like it is definitely a no-brainer. You have to get there and you have to sort of preserve it, because that's, I mean, the stores are what you have. So yeah, certainly.
Yeah, exactly. Even there are many companies, those who purchase 100% green electricity have installed various, photovoltaic systems at several of their production sites, and they cover most of their electricity requirements through the renewable sources only. So yeah, and I also like to put in Waterless Beauty that using less water makes more sense.
Yeah.
Thank you, speakers, for sharing your wonderful thoughts and experiences with us today. The next topic of the discussion will be taken up by Isha. Isha, your mic is on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, speakers, and thank you, Ishu, for your insights. I would be talking about sustainable packaging and design. Product packaging sends an instant subconscious message to the consumers about the values of the cosmetics brand. Its design must align with the company mission and the brand identity. Consumers anticipate receiving sustainable packaging that would match their expectations of the product's substance, its types, and its properties. Like eco-friendly packaging is the future of the cosmetic industry. Like here are some examples which companies are working on for sustainable packaging. Like they're using paper-based products, offering refillable packaging formats, replacing plastic with sustainable materials, bottles made from soap and beeswax. They are designing for reuse, and they are also reducing the packaging. So I would like to discuss with the speakers that can we use less and in the packaging, and do you think using less is more for the packaging and design, because we are designing to reduce the waste and we are using 100% recyclable materials or some percentage of recyclable materials to provide the protection against the damage? And can we mix materials to create a smaller packaging footprint? Because consumers are being aware of the sustainable practices and the sustainable packaging and design. Like if even I saw that they are talking about, oh yeah, this company is using recycled paper or recycled plastic, or using a sustainable material. If I talk about organic material for using the packaging of the product. So what are your opinion on that? Joe, would you like to go ahead first?
Yeah, so we're big believers in reuse. So if we take the Lush model where there's no packaging, I mean, that would be the ultimate, but that doesn't work for every product format. Yeah. So there has to be packaging in some instances. Yeah. And in my head, why would you want to pay for packaging, even if it's cheap, ugly plastic packaging? Why would you want to pay for it? And then it just goes to landfill or wherever it ends up. So we are big on reuse. So our packaging is reusable, and we have the infrastructure where the packaging is sent back to us, and we use reverse logistics for that to keep our carbon footprint down. So for example, we work with retailers in the UK, and what happens is when our products are sold, the customer can then return the empties to those retailers. And when the retailers are dropping off products in Scotland to other areas, they drop off the empties to us. So we call this a circular economy, and it's a closed loop system. We also have the data to support that the reusable packaging that we have, which is in 3 different formats. So we use glass, aluminium, and stainless steel, that all of those formats only have to be used once for glass, once for stainless steel, and 3 times for aluminium for that carbon footprint to become positive. So the data is there. It's still in its infancy. We are a small business. However, we have a desire to be able to change anyone within the industry that wants to use reusable packaging.
Thank you, Joe. I think Isha's networks are down. So Shabia, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely up to us, right? Like, for example, we used to have soaps wrapped in shrink wrap and then put in a paper box. Yeah. And I realized that there's really no need for that shrink wrap. I mean, and I remember one of my customers said that, do you really, I mean, what happens if there's no shrink wrap? And it got me thinking, yeah, what happens? Because we have cold processed soaps, nothing happens. It does not release water. It does not lose its shape. And why am I, except for it when it's getting shipped or in monsoon, and you need to be careful, but that's like one off, right? That the chances that it might get wet or whatever. So we actually dropped the shrink wrap from the soaps. We just now put it in a box and that's it. And as I said earlier, most of our creams are in glass jars. We do a lot of gifting. Okay, we do a lot of corporate gifting and gift hampers, and most people want the plastic shrink wrap to cover the basket because it looks beautiful. But I'm always like a teacher trying to tell them, can I do a cloth wrapping? Can I do a brown paper wrapping? And trying to tease them with different options because I don't want to use that plastic. So yeah, in every possible way, wherever we can reduce that waste and replace it with paper. And going forward, yes, I want to even get rid of the plastic which we use for shampoo bottles, or bottles which we use in the bathroom. So that's and I see a big change there also. Like 3 years back, when I started looking for recyclable jars, and it wasn't so freely available. But now there are a lot of options, because I think now people have also realized that there's a market for this. So manufacturers are coming up with bottles which are made of recycled plastic and things like that. And as a brand, I think yes, that's topmost on my mind every time a product is being sold. We are not huge on retail. We don't have retail shops, but yes, someday if we do, I am going to go by what Joe said, where people can actually come back with their empty bottles and there's a tap and they can fill it and pay me and go away. I mean, that's the best way possible, right? So yes, I'm all for sustainable packaging. And I think India still lacks a lot of options, a lot of economical options. And there is a huge need to build up on that. And I'm sure when we all come together and address this, there will be people who will come up with those solutions too. It will take some time, but I'm sure it's in the offing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Packaging is the key to the customer's heart, because it is the first thing that consumers see when targeting. And yeah, even the company are working on that. Rajan, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah. See, as far as products without packing is concerned, that would be a little difficult on our space, because since we use a lot of aromas, and a lot of aromas, you cannot make products which are without packing. So you need packing to actually keep the aromas actually. So this is something. one thing which is there. So we need packing. But having said that, we are probably the only men's grooming space. We do not in the space that we do not have any plastic packing in any of our products. So we are already you're well aware of it that even our soaps come in a paper packing. My all beard products come in glass packing. So we are fairly that was something which was already one of our USPs. We wanted to when we started, we know that we do not want to be no plastic bottles is something which we were very clear with. So we do not have it. We are already following it to an extent. And even the future products, our packings is majorly glass and metal packing. So we will not, so we don't have any kind of a plastics which is used in our products.
Okay, I'd like to interrupt. So Jo has a pre-scheduled meeting and she's about to leave us in 10 minutes. And I'd like to say thank you so much, Jo. We're very grateful to have you today here with us.
No, it's been lovely. It's just we could all talk about this for all day.
Yes. Thank you, Jo. Lovely meeting you.
Absolutely. Lovely meeting you, Jo.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'd love to connect with you in our future webinars. Okay, we can start.
Should I go? Yeah. So I think when it comes to sustainable packaging and design, to me, even as a person where I started my journey off from a sustainability initiative course from college, it was very important for me for the material to just be recyclable, not in theory, but also in practicality. So from that scenario, I think it's very important to just close the loop and make sure that when you say something is recyclable, it's also getting recycled at the same time. So we work with this company called Disposable Co, where we, even though you're using glass as your primary packaging, there are little parts of the caps or maybe the inside bags probably are something that are made of plastic. So we still make a conscious effort to recycle double the amounts of plastic that we already use in form of those bottles. In some places, you don't have a choice when you're doing sample sizes or when you're doing all those kinds of things. We have often observed, even in a something like a mist or like a toner bottle, it's something that has to be travel friendly, that they are carrying along in their bags. Probably people prefer to use plastic bottles more than a glass bottle. So in those cases, we make sure that the plastic is recyclable and it's also recycled from our end, and it's not just said to be recyclable in whatever minimal quantities we use it. But yeah, I think glass is all the way. I mean, as much as you can, I think it should be something that we all should be keen upon using. Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, my Wi-Fi is giving me a hard time. I'm really sorry about it.
It's okay. Thank you, Nikita, for sharing your wonderful thoughts on this.
Moving on to the ethical and responsible sourcing, rising ethical consumerism is compelling global cosmetic brands to work towards sustainable development. They are expected to ensure that raw materials they are sourcing for cosmetic products are sourced in a responsible way, and the workers are involved in the process are paid well. So the issues that crop up in this industry are the controversial sourcing of mica, the use of toxic ingredients, and the animal testing. Mica and palm oil are especially concerning. Both the ingredients are found in millions of products and are incredibly difficult to track back to ethical and sustainable practices. Like there are also issues, animal testing in cosmetics and toiletries. Toxic chemicals are used in ingredients in cosmetics and toiletries. Microplastics are used in the cosmetics. The palm oil role. Like there are currently over 200 versions of palm oil derivatives living in shampoos, soaps, lipsticks, and lotions. In order to meet this demand, the palm oil industry is regularly cuts down the rainforest to expand their plantations. Example, like in Malaysian Borneo, palm oil production has accounted for 57 to 69% of deforestation from 1972 to 2015, and destroying the species-rich rainforest in the process. This has not only led to 99% less tree diversity compared to the natural forest, but has also devastated the wildlife within the region. And lastly, child labor, the problem with the mica, this is a major concern because 90% of the mica mines are in Jharkhand and Bihar, and children as young as 5 are still toiling away in these mines, breathing in toxins daily. They allegedly employ 20,000 children and even now supply most of the mica used in our beauty products. I would like to discuss with the panelists that supplier code of conduct is the foundation of the responsible and ethical sourcing. Why do you think, or where do you think it can be improved? Do you think the supplier evaluation and monitoring is not being implemented with the proper rules and regulations in mica and palm oil industry? And do you think the animal testing in the cosmetic industry is beneficial? Should animal testing be more regulated and monitored in the cosmetic industry? What is your opinion about it? Joe, would you like to go ahead?
So the reason why we're in the beauty industry and the reason why you buy skincare, you buy makeup, lipstick, mascara is generally for self-confidence, self-esteem. It's about, the choice that you can, when you're choosing a lipstick color, it's an experience to be able to do that and it makes you feel good. Yeah. What we don't want to do is spoil that with the list of all of these horrendous areas and issues that can happen within our industry. And I think as smaller brands, we need to be more confident in asking our suppliers those questions. And I think we need to take responsibility for asking those questions because it's hard. However, if we don't ask those questions, the consumers are already asking us those questions, and those questions are going to keep on coming, and we need to have those answers. But for me, it's always about working in collaboration. It's about approaching your suppliers and saying, I'm here to help. Let me help you, get palm oil out of our formulations. Let's find other ways of doing things rather than it necessarily, being a big stick. It's about working together to ensure that the other thing with palm oil, which is a bit of a challenge, is the farmers that are currently there, there's a balance between making sure that they still have a way of creating, money for their own families. So it is more complicated, but I think if we face into it and ask our suppliers the right questions and do it in a very partnership way, then, and we're all doing it for the greater good, then that's the way that we approach it. And no to animal testing. I mean, no to animal testing, just no.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Joe. Like the proper due diligence should be there and should be taken care of properly in the manufacturing units of where it is to be done. And even the palm oil is the plus points that have led to the huge demand globally, like which has devastating consequences. Even the company's approaches to the issues very hugely and from providing no information at all about the palm oil and sourcing, and while listing palm oil derivatives in the ingredient list, to others going to the great lengths to reformulate products which they are avoiding at all. Yeah. Shabia, would you like to go ahead?
That, I will leave you guys. Thank you very much for having me, and it was lovely to meet everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, I think, it is need and wants that fuels supply, right? I mean, because people are buying, people are wanting it. There are people who are making it, and there is a supply for it, right? I think the moment we say we do not want it, we stopping that supply chain, right? So, like, I was very clear from the beginning that no palm oil will be used in my soaps, and there were people who told me, there were manufacturers who told me that then the cost of your product will go up. I said, no problem. Let's go with olive oil. Let's go with coconut oil. I mean, there is always a substitute if you want to find that substitute. So I think Joe was right in what she said, that as smaller brands, because we have a smaller consumer base, we can have a twofold effect. One is the questions we ask our manufacturers, and the other is to educate our consumers, because see, when you see a very glittering bottle in a very nicely packaged box, you just see that and you go and buy it. But what you don't see, or maybe what we need to spell out in big words, is that there may be a child involved in that process, or there may be some ingredient which is not good for you, and we need to make sure that that's highlighted on what we are selling. So sometimes it's a good thing to, tell your consumers that don't go for this, don't go for that. And that constant effort, sometimes it may seem very futile. Like in exhibitions, sometimes people ask me, oh, this soap cost me 25 rupees. Why should I pay 200 rupees for your soap? And I sometimes I see the futility in it and I say, okay, sir, you please buy that soap. But when I see a half educated customer, then I go and take all the effort of explaining what is palm oil, what does it do, what do phthalates do, what do silicones do. So I think that education can only come from us, and it will only come when we ourselves are aware and courageous enough to take decisions which may not be always cheap, which may not or be always without any consequences, but they have to be taken. And that's the beauty, I think, of being a small business, because you're doing it for passion and not so much it's not so much money driven than why you set out to do it. So yeah.
That's so true, Shravya. Yeah, that's really very true. It's about, we have to constantly sort of make that choice whether you want to grow big or too fast, or do you want to stay small and stay true to your ethics and just I just relived that incident when you told about the soap when you used to sell in markets. It's the same thing that used to happen. It's something that this customer is not going to understand what you're trying to tell him. You just let it be. Just let them be. But somewhere you see an opportunity, you want to bank on it. It's an added effort, but I think it comes to you so truly because you're so passionate about it. So yeah, that's very true.
Yes, Shravya, I definitely agree with you. Even educating the customers or the consumers, it's really important nowadays that how it is sourced, is it being ethically sourced or responsibly sourced or not? Moving on to Mr. Rajan.
And believe me, it's very tempting. It's very tempting to, I'll just add that it's very tempting to change tracks, because when you see your competitors and the bigger brands doing well and coming in with those 7-8 figure the turnovers, it's very tempting. But then that's the choice you've made, and that's what you call being true to why you started your venture. So it's not that we are human beings, we get tempted, but then there are choices to be made every day, and we continue.
Yeah, but I also think, Shravya, it's not. It's not impossible to grow keeping your ethics intact. It's just going to be slower, but I don't think it's impossible.
Yeah. No, I mean, I met you at an exhibition, Nikita. I remember a small exhibition many years ago, and I remember, another brand can see. So this is how I also started, and that look on your face that a person will come to your table and buy that product and then leave. And it is so empowering for me as a brand to see your brand doing so well, and then there is scope, and it gives you that encouragement that of course we can grow. We might take 2 years more, but we will grow.
No, of course, and it's about just constantly being open to change, listening to what people have to say, questioning things around you, and just making sure that there's nothing that can make you change tracks. Like it just constantly has to be about that.
Absolutely.
That's so nice that we met. Maybe I don't remember you right now, but that's really nice that we met already.
Yeah. Sorry, I think Joe should speak now. We women have.
Okay.
Mr. Rajan, would you like to go ahead now?
Sorry, Rajan. I didn't Rajan.
Yeah. See, I feel that somewhere why we all are in this space is that we are those points of change. And, our consumers were looking for that, that space, and there was not existing. And now we are there. So that space is there, that just this is a product which is completely what I was looking for. And I know that this is a space where you will not see the biggies coming in because they will not see it viable. So this niche market will always be a niche market, and it will grow big. It will grow very big. There is a lot of growth in it, but then it will be niche because we are those points of change. And it is us to choose those, as you said, palm oil. Again, as Shravya said, that we are actually, the formulations is up to us. We would like to choose formulations. We would like to choose products which are completely organic. We want to use products which are packaging, which is very eco-friendly. And that is what our USPs, and that's why our consumers connect with us. So that's completely, that's what I think of. And as far as, of course, the the child labor part and the mica thing is there. We don't have it in our products, so we don't connect with that as such. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rajan. Nikita, would you like to go ahead?
Yes. So with palm oil, actually, interestingly, my graduation project was based on the study of how much devastating the effects of palm oil are on the rainforests of the entire Asian countries. And that is what led me to sort of start my work on the brand and believe in sustainability and want to make that narrative and start there. So I think with palm oil, the more we say, the less it is. But I think it being an occlusive, even like Shabia said, we were so hell-bent on never using it in our products. I don't think it does any good except for reducing the costs of your product. But again, it's about going that extra step, making that narrative and telling people how not of a good ingredient it is, and we were all up for that. Now, mica is considered, yes, we do use mica in our products, but again, it comes back to sourcing and where you're sourcing from. Going back to the certifications, this is one thing that certifications allow you to do is because of the stringent audits that they conduct. They make sure that the places that you're sourcing from are taking care of all of these things and that they are in line with their ethics. Having said that, however, I don't think for a brand our size is also it's impossible to have these have these parameters in place where you constantly are checking what is happening there. So we work with the manufacturer and we actually made that effort of going an extra mile to just make sure that the mica that where we source it from, it comes from a legally dated community which does not involve any child labor. So I think, yes, I'm sure like the stats are right. 90% of the mica still comes from mining locations where child labor is still involved. But I think it's about increasing awareness. Like interestingly, Lush uses a synthetic alternative to mica, which is just for the reason that they conducted this documentary and a sting operation in the mines of Jharkhand. It's a really nice video by I think BuzzFeed or Bustle, I think. I'm not sure. But it's a really interesting video where they show all the things that actually happen in the mines of Jharkhand and Bihar. And they use a synthetic alternative to mica. So again, linking back to the point where I said that sustainability and our ethics are a lot more important than just being natural and organic. So in places where an ingredient is probably doing things like it's involving child labor, it's not sustainable. We don't choose natural over all of these things. It's always about the ethics first. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, definitely. Because if we talk about the palm oil, it is really bad for the environment destruction or the climate change because it is already impacting the local communities and the animal extinction. And when I move forward for the mica, it is the ingredient that used widely in the beauty, in the beauty cosmetic industry. And it is found that the use of child labor in India to source the mica. And because even I read the article of according to Ter de Oom in Netherlands, they work exhausting and hazardous jeopardizing their health because children and moreover children cannot attend the school. And therefore TDH announced that the new multi-stakeholder body that been established with the 21 actors across the industries and the NGOs teaming up to form the Responsible Mica Initiative. So that the initiative is aiming to eradicate the child labor and unacceptable working conditions in the Indian mica supply chain. So at least they will be working on there will be no child labor in the mica that they have been in the mines.
Right.
Yeah.
There are child deaths that happen because just the caves collapse on top of them. Just as little as that. So,
I think in India, strict regulation is also the answer to most things because it's
also the most difficult thing to execute.
It's so easy to get away with so much in India. So I think very strict regulations, GMP certified units, regular checks, surprise checks, applauding people, smaller brands who are going that extra mile, giving them support. I think government can do so much there. We as brands can support each other in calling out, people who don't follow versus applauding people who follow, regulations. I think that needs to fall in place, and there's a lot of scope there, because regulations can be moderated in India, and I think that gives a lot of leeway to the defaulters.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you that government should do something about the child labor, because like in many, like in the mines or like many brands are working, but they didn't know that there is child labor happening.
Yeah.
And they should definitely work on that. Yeah. So thank you so much, speakers, for your insights. Moving on to the conclusion, Ishu will take over.
Thank you, Isha. So now we have come to the last part of our webinar, that is the conclusion part. Here we will quickly look into all the things that we've discussed so far. Starting with the sourcing, we will also discuss with our speakers on ethical and responsible sourcing of various ingredients, including mica. It is clear that through ethical sourcing, brands support the social and economical development of communities while ensuring sourcing upon natural resources in an ethical manner. Also, more local production can contribute to more sustainable and shorter supply chains, leading to a more personal and authentic image of the brand. Then comes sustainable packaging. So beauty brands target at least 75 to 100% of their packaging to be from sustainable materials like post-consumer waste, and also offering refilling options if consumer gives back 2 to 3 empty bottles to the brand. Now, talking about ecological ingredients, BioBeauty will avoid the damage and protect the ecosystem since the ingredients have been grown organically. Beauty brands are also focusing on cruelty-free, vegan, and sustainable products which are safer for people and the planet. And lastly, we have transparency, which is in huge demand in the beauty industry for information about ingredients, their origins, manufacturing process, etc. Consumers want safe, environmentally friendly, and fair products in line with their beliefs. However, in the beauty industry, beauty industry is suffering from a supply chain problem where the inclusion of numerous middlemen makes it hard to trace the exact origins of our beauty ingredients, and thus this makes supply chain management as one of the most viable and promising applications of the blockchain technology. So thank you all for joining today. And now Isha will take over to wrap up this session with her closing statement. Isha, your mic is on mute.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining the webinar today. And it was great to have such experts from the beauty industry and enlighten us about the sustainable beauty. We would be organizing more webinars on sustainability on different industries as well, and would be great to have you there. If you have any queries or any other questions, you can email us at info@utopic.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.